I'm sure you don't know who he is either. John Mulrooney was against Rosie in Star Search, and he blew her away. He was so much funnier that it was, Helen Keller knew that he won. And he was on, I think this might be on YouTube, John Mulrooney, M-U-L-R-O-O-N-E-Y, John Mulrooney and Rosie O'Donnell. He's standing there, and she's standing there, and they go, and the winner is, and as they say that, he waves to the crowd to say thank you, and he goes, and the winner is Rosie O'Donnell. And he went like that. He won, but he lost. So that's my Rosie O'Donnell. Yes, I was. The shorter answer is yes, I was on Star Search. And it was great fun. It was a very professional. It was as much fun as I've ever had doing anything in my life. I wish I had won just so I could come back because it was free room service. You're not chilly. You want me to get you a blanket?
How many jokes does the average comedian have to tell in like one show?
How many jokes? I'm not a comedian. I'm a joke teller. Comedians, it's so funny because I didn't go into this to be a comedian. So when I first started, people were like, oh, that guy, opened up a joke book and started telling jokes. That had nothing to do with it. I've been telling dirty jokes since I was in 2nd or 3rd grade and told jokes my entire life. And when I was 31 and they threw me out of the band, I certainly wasn't going to get a job. I had long hair and I had a lot of booze to drink. I had too much to do. So I figured I'd try telling jokes on stage, so I just used the repertoire that I collected forever and ever. And so I'm not a comedian that says, I got a terrible girlfriend, and I own my apartment, and my parents are mean to me. I tell jokes, and I tell rapid-fire jokes, jokes. The average comedian, does routines and tells stories. There's like they say that a comic should get a laugh every 15 seconds. Some people say a comic should get a laugh every 30 seconds. It depends on who you talk to. It's very funny. If you watch Seinfeld, it's great. It's the greatest show ever. If you watch The Odd Couple from 20 or 30 years ago, it's the same show. Completely different show, but it's the same idea, but at a completely different speed. You watch Seinfeld, you watch The Odd Couple, it's like, it's wonderful. It's the world. It's like you guys are too young, but if you ever went to a phone, there used to be a rotary dial phone. When I bought my house, there was a phone in the basement. It was a very old house in Babel, and the old guy who lived there still had a rotary phone in the basement. Sometimes somebody calls you up and says, "Call me right away," and you got to call them back, right? So the phone rings. Call me. You got to call Charlie. And you can't help but say, "Holy Christ, was the world moving at a different speed?" Just waiting for the and you extrapolate and say, "Imagine the whole world going." And it's a pleasant thought. I mean, now, Jesus Christ, come on, come on. She's crapping around. Oh, we got 2 minutes. We got 30 seconds. It's a nicer pace. So, some comics say zoom, zoom, zoom. Me, I go a million miles an hour, but I slow up where I have to. And even in a joke, you get so you're good at it. I tell a joke, I go fast at the parts that don't matter, but when it's a piece of the information you really need, I'll slow up a little bit, and then when I'm talking, say just doing part of the story, and then I say, but she had a very nice green dog. It's subtle, but So the answer is I have no idea.
I read online how you sent the tapes out to Howard Stern, and then he listened and called you back and had you as a guest appearance on the show. Did you send the tapes out to other radio stations? Did they give you a chance?
I just sent my proposal for my memoirs, and the people that got my memoirs said, we don't know if we can sell a book about you. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? It couldn't be more interesting. I worked at a recording studio, learned that any idiot can have an album if they have a tape. I always tape recorded my shows. I chopped up a tape, made an album. I had my own album. Everybody's so impressed. I was in comedy for 6 months. There was no such thing as a comedy club. I recorded my album in Huntington, in a restaurant, at a little show we had. But it's so impressive to have an LP. Nobody knew that RCA Records didn't do it. I did it. I borrowed $100 from my mother and my neighbor, you know what I mean? So I had an album, and then I made another one, and I made another one. And at that point, she was my girlfriend, she became my wife, we sent out 400 sets of all 3 albums, the matching cassettes, all my promotion. If I met you and said, oh, how you doing? Oh, that's a nice camera. You want some of my stuff? I take your address. We sent out, and believe me, the price of the materials and the postage. I started Governor's Comedy Shop on Long Island, and I was making some money for producing the shows, but I certainly didn't have, I mean, it was a big deal to be sending out we're sending them to everybody. And I worked in a club in Washington, D.C., called Garvin's, and the owner said to me, there's this crazy guy that just got fired from DC 101, and he's going to WNBC in New York, you should look him up, he's a crazy man. He used to do broadcasts in his underwear on Friday mornings from my club. He would love you. And I got home and sent my albums to Howard Stern, care of NBC, that blindly, like I sent out 400 other sets of them. Blindly. It was the classic toss shit against the wall and see what sticks. And there is no better example of that expression that I've ever heard of. And one day Nancy called up and said, hey, you got to call back WNBC. That guy Howard Stern called up. And I called up, he put him on the phone right away, said, hey, listen, my guy Fred and I listened to your records. We think you're right. You know every joke there ever was. Do you want to come in and help judge a talent contest? I said, sure. And I drove into New York City, and here all of a sudden, instead of Levittown, I'm in, Rockefeller Center, and, at WNBC, and there's Imus, and there's Howard, and, there's pictures of Billy Joel and everybody else, and we had and it was me and Howard and Robin and Fred. The same people it was 18 years later. And at the end of the day, it was fun. And they said, man, you're fun. Why don't you come back next week? So I went back every week for 3 years for free. And then he went to mornings, and I was passing notes the whole time and made him very, very much funnier. And we went to the moon. And it was just from blindly, and a couple of years before that, my friend Richie, who I did the show with at the restaurant where I recorded my album, came home one night and said, hey, I met Rodney tonight. I was at Rodney Dangerfield's club. And he told me he loved me. He was going to put me on his TV show. I said, wow. So then I'm living at my grandmother's house. She had died. It's a free place to crash. And I typed up 6 pages of jokes for Rodney. And then I see Richie say, here, give these to your friend Rodney. He goes, oh, man. He says, I lied. He says, I went to the club, but he wasn't there, So I guess he's not really going to put you on TV. He said, I'm sure I'll meet him eventually. I said, you piece of shit. And he said, yeah, but I was there. And there's a true story. He took out the matchbook. It said, Dangerfield's, 1001 First Avenue, New York. I had already typed out the jokes. I put them in an envelope, wrote Rodney Dangerfield, mailed it, and 2 days later, Rodney called me up. I wound up going to Las Vegas with him, giving him his best joke ever. Flying blind, just throwing shit against the wall. So it's, and that's how I met Howard, just sending him my records. And I don't know if you saw the movie Private Parts, but he says, Robin, today we have Jackie Martling with us. If he had held up my records and said, he sent us these records, that would have been so great. And not only would it have been great for me, it would have time-stamped 1983, because nowadays, half the kids don't even know what an LP is. It would have been so cool. What's that? Oh, that's what CDs used to look like, But that's a true story. That's how that happened. I think that was your question, man. Hi.
What's your?
Well, hold on. Is that what you?
Yeah.
What's your most memorable moment from Howard Stern show?
I've been asked that so many times, and there's so many great moments. Joe Walsh and Sam Kinison both walked in naked except for their bathrobes. The whole world thought that I took a dump in the Stanley Cup, which wasn't true. But my personal favorite moment that wouldn't sound as if I was like a singer-songwriter, and I love folk music, country music, singer-songwriters. And James Taylor came on the show, and when we were in the old studio, I sat here, and Howard was here, and Fred was here, and Robin was behind the glass, and the guest sat in a chair right here, and the wall was right here. So